Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to film a quick intro for this series reading vlog, which hopefully will be a shorter one because we are reading a duology. I want to read the Radiant Emperor duology by Shelley Jen. The first book is She Who Became the Sun, and the second book is He Who Drowned the World. I'm very excited for this. I'm also a tiny little bit hesitant. This is a series that is inspired by Chinese history, and I already started the book, and the author's note at the beginning of She Who Became the Sun is really good. It really describes like the historical facts of that time, what was going on when the story is set, which I thought was really great because I already saw like some crossovers to other books I've read. For example, the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu, which is also inspired by Chinese history, and I could see some parts that might have inspired that storyline as well. So I am very intrigued. I generally do love historical fantasy, and we'll just see where the story takes us. I think it will be, if you heard that, that was the cat. She sometimes does that, and it's like such a scary sound. I'm just prepared that this will probably be bleak and sad, but also I read the first chapter. Our main character seems to have so much inner strength, so I'm very excited to delve into this story with her, and I'll let you know how it goes. Now, the way we'll do this is that I will always update you when I'm halfway through a book and when I have finished the book. And most of this will be spoiler-free. If I talk about spoilers, I will say that quite clearly so you can avoid spoilers if you haven't read this duology yet. But I hope you have fun watching this. I'm very excited to read these books, so let's get started. So I'm trying to use the last little bit of daylight for this update because I am now halfway through She Who Became the Sun, and I am currently watching Reading Sprints by Riley Marie and Gavin Reads It All. So I want to read some more, so we have to do this update. But yeah, what is this book about? Basically, we have a family and they are living in a village and there is a terrible drought, and so basically everyone is dying because they don't have any crops, any food, any water. And we have this family, there's 3 people left, a father, a son and a daughter. And the father has the fortune of the son told, and basically they say that his fate is greatness, basically. And then the daughter asks for her fate, and that is to be nothing. And so she's really devastated because she grew up just like being a servant to her father and her brother, and you can see how she's very capable at keeping herself alive. And with most families, the daughters were the first ones to die because they were seen as expendable. But she is still there, and she's taking care of herself and her like male family members. And so one day something terrible happens. The father dies, and then also the brother dies. And so now we have this young girl with a fate of being nothing, and her dead brother who was supposed to gain greatness. And so she decides to take over his life. And she goes to a monastery where he was expected, and she actually manages to get into the monastery because she is so desperate but also strong-willed. And then in the first part of the book we see her grow up in the monastery, and then again something happens and the monastery, she has to leave it, basically. Let's just say that. And then we enter part 2, and that is where the story actually begins. And I struggled with that quite a bit because I got used to the first chapter. Like, I was interested in this girl's life, and we have like big time jumps in this first part, where we just see like glimpses of the monastery life. And then suddenly in the second part, we have this big shift. We do have completely new characters. We are still following that girl, but also other characters. And it was just very jarring for me to get my bearings again. But I did, and I am very happy to say that now at the halfway point, I'm absolutely loving it. So basically, starting with this part 2, we do have, I would say, like 3 main perspectives. There are quite a few characters that we follow quite closely. The first one still is that girl, and I'm gonna mispronounce all of the names because I'm not listening to the audiobook, so I'm so sorry. Yeah, please just ignore it. So I think the girl is called something like Zhu, and she now is a monk. She has left the monastery, and she is looking for that greatness that her brother was promised in his stead. And because of that, she enters a army, and she very quickly climbs the rank because she's very smart and she has big ambitions. Then we have a girl called Ma, and she is the daughter of the general of that army, but the general has just been killed, and so now she is kind of in a not so great position. She is betrothed to another like important person in that military, but they don't really like each other at all. She meets Zhu, and they start having this kind of friendship where I'm very intrigued to see where it goes. And then last but not least, we have the other side of things, because the whole conflict, I should say that, is that at the point in time where we're looking at this, China has been conquered by the Mongols, and so we have the Mongol side as well, with a character, something like Ouyang, not quite sure. He is, and again, I have no idea how to say that in English. I should have looked it up. A eunuch? I don't know, how do you pronounce that? In German we say Eunuch, but that is like probably super far away from the English pronunciation. But basically his family has been marked as traitors, and they were supposed to be all killed, but he pleaded for his life, and so he was just mutilated, and is now also a general, but on the other side of this war. But he is seeking revenge secretly. These are like the main characters, and then we have a lot going on around them. We have a lot of like political intrigue, but also this like military planning and just living in this like military life. But fortunately we don't have too much of that, because I really don't like reading military fantasy, and for a moment I was a bit worried when we started into the second part, but luckily it's not too much for me personally so far. And I'm really intrigued by these characters. They're all very complex, they're all very smart and ambitious. They have very clear goals and also very clear obstacles in their ways. So yeah, I find this a great read, because I like reading about characters and interesting character dynamics. And I feel like this is exactly what I'm getting right now. So I am extremely happy with my read of this book so far. And I can't wait to continue reading it in a second to see where the journey goes. So far it is a great success, and I don't think I will say much more, because yeah, we will go a little bit more in depth maybe than when I have finished the book. So far this is going really well. Maybe one more thing I can say is that it really reminds me of the Dandelion Dynasty series, because I think they take inspiration from very similar things in Chinese history. So that is also really fun to just see the like small similarities, especially with the way that the Mongols live and their culture and how that translates into a people that we also saw in the Dandelion Dynasty series and stuff. So yeah, it's just fascinating and I really like it and I just want to continue reading, so that's what I'm gonna do. So last night I finished reading She Who Became the Sun. I am officially obsessed with this book, and so we need to talk about it. I had such a great time reading this book. I know that at the halfway point I wasn't so sure about it yet, but after that I became obsessed. I couldn't stop reading. I fell in love with these characters. They're all so smart and cunning and ambitious and dark, and they have such complex relationships because sometimes their goals align and sometimes they don't, and it is just perfection. It is so good. Like, all the intrigue is what I live for. There is a lot of political intrigue, some military planning, and I loved it. I loved it so much. So honestly, I gave this book 4.5 stars, and the only reason for that is the rocky start. Because I think if you would take the first part of the book and make it a prologue that is basically the first chapter, and then how our main character enters the monastery, and then you sprinkle in the rest more in like little flashbacks maybe when you need it, it would have been so much better, because we could have gotten right down to what is really important. Because this first part is not important. The character we see there, we will basically never see her again, because this character just changes so much. And the biggest beef I have with this book is that between the leaving of the monastery and the arriving with the red turbans, there is something happening within our character. She decides something. And that is what we don't see. And that is the important link we would need for the first part to make sense. But because we do not see that, it feels like we do this like weird jump into a completely different story. And it didn't work. I'm sorry, it did not work. But the rest, like starting from part 2, once you get used to these characters, you know who they are, it is such an amazing book. And I loved it so much. So please, if you haven't read this book yet, you need to get through the first part. And then just know that it will change. But it will change for the better if you love these cunning, super smart characters, okay? So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I'm honestly, I threw my whole like reading plan for this week out of the window and immediately downloaded Huge Round the World, because I cannot be a single day without these characters. I need to know how this story continues. And I know that a lot of people didn't like the first book as much, the second book as much as the first book. Whenever I'm doing these series reading vlogs where I read them like marathon read them or read them very close together, I always feel like this is a different reading experience from people who have read the first book when it came out and then the second book when it came out, with like a long pause in between. So I hope that I will feel differently. I hope that I will absolutely love the second book as well. But I'm just stoked. I'm just so excited, and I just love when a fantasy book just grabs me and doesn't let go. It is such a fantastic experience. So you see, I'm all about the gushing. I'm so happy I read this book. I mentioned in the beginning that I was a bit worried because I didn't love the Poppy War, and I felt like they had similar vibes with them being inspired by Chinese history, with having very cunning main characters. But honestly, this book is what I wanted the Poppy War to be. And I'm so happy I read it, because I was unsure whether I should, and it was the best thing. I think just this period in Chinese history that this book is inspired by, and also the Dandelion Dynasty is inspired by, I think it's just so fascinating to me. And the Poppy War is inspired by a completely different time in China, and I think that one, while is also historically very, very interesting and a lot of horrible things have happened, it just doesn't grip me with the same intensity, because it didn't have, or maybe it did, but at least the Poppy War didn't show so much of the political maneuvering, and it was more military, and that's just not for me. So all the gushing aside, just read the book if you haven't already. But if you have read the book, I think I want to go into a couple of spoilers just so I can gush some more, but I try to keep it down because I don't want this video to be 2 hours long just because I can't shut up about this first book. So if you haven't read the book, please leave now. You can use the chapters to jump ahead to my spoiler-free thoughts on the second book, and with everyone else, let's discuss some spoilers. So where do I even start? As I said, I think that we didn't need the whole like monastery bit at the beginning. I think that the Zhu we see in those chapters is such a different person from the one that we have for the rest of the book. And as I said, I think we're missing like some important kind of character development where she really decides to go for her fate, which is when she leaves the monastery. Like she, up until that point, sought the greatness within the monastery, but then she decides, no, it has to be bigger, and that's the part we don't see. And so I felt like that was not done really well. But after that, her development is just so fascinating, and I loved the ending. I loved how she realized that she doesn't have to be her brother to achieve the greatness that she craves, that it is already in her. And also the like gender discussions that come with her development were so interesting to me as well. I honestly don't really know how well it portrays gender struggles, just because I don't struggle with my gender in that way, but to me it made a lot of sense the way that she doesn't see herself as a woman because she has never lived as a woman, and at the same time she also knows she's not a man and that she's just something other. And I just really liked the way that was explored. And with that, I also really liked the way that her losing her hand was explored, because for once we do not have this like ableist struggle that the character goes into a depression because they lost a limb. Instead, she celebrates that she is still alive, and she can even celebrate that she's finally become herself, that she accepted that her body will never be the body that her brother would have had, and so she doesn't have to strive for that anymore. And I loved that part. I think it was so interesting the way that embodiment was portrayed in this part. So especially since I'm currently also reading Ship of Magic, where characters lose limbs also. There is like one character in Ship of Magic who gets like super depressed and angry and kind of stupid about it. And so this was so refreshing as a different way to portray this. And then the relationship that Zhu has with Ma is so beautiful. I absolutely loved it, like the beginning of it, the tenderness of it. We do get one explicit sex scene, which I also liked. I have to admit, there was this moment when they were like beginning to explore each other, and then you turn the page and it jumps to like a strategy meeting, and I was like, no, that did not happen. That did not happen. But then later on we do see them together a little bit more, and I just loved the tenderness between them, and then also kind of the struggle. I think it will be very interesting to see how this develops in the second book, because at the end we obviously have more conflict in their relationship because Zhu kills the Prince of Radiance and Ma does not agree with that. So I'm very intrigued to see where that goes. I loved that final scene where everyone is kneeling and then Ma standing up in her beautiful dress and headdress, and oh, that was just if you picture that, oh, amazing, amazing. So yeah, absolutely loved these two. I also really loved the brother monk character that we have. I think that in the like author's note or like acknowledgements in the end, Shelley Parker Jen mentions that I think their husband said that at least one of the male characters should not be awful in this book. And so I think we got the like monk brother character, and I did really enjoy that. I think that it is important to have balance in your stories, and so having a male character who is a good guy is amazing, and I really loved his character for that, and I'm again very intrigued to see where that goes in the future. And then we have this whole other side of things with Ouyang, and I'm very intrigued to see where that goes. I love him dearly. He is such a flawed character, and I am obsessed. I think that the way he is portrayed in this book is just so fascinating, and just the way the way it ends, like obviously we get this feeling what his like overall goal is throughout the story, and we see like the little stepping stones he is building up to that. But then this final scene where he kills, what's his name, Essen, I don't know how to say it. that was a lot. That was a lot. And for a very brief moment, I wasn't sure whether he could do it, and I think he himself wasn't sure whether he could do it, but then at the same time, he had put so much in motion that he couldn't stop anymore. So, oh, that was so intense. That was so intense. And I also loved the meeting, like the last meeting of Zhu and Ouyang, where they talk about this plot of the not the prime minister, what was it? The left minister? I don't know, whatever they were called. But where they basically say, hey, we have the same goal here, so let's help each other. And I really loved that as well. And I'm intrigued to see in the second book whether they will clash more or whether they will have more common goals, because I think now the run for the Emperor's seat will begin, and there are, I think, 3 players that are important right now. We have obviously Zhu and the Red Turbans, who are probably not Red Turbans anymore. Then we have Ouyang and his allegiance with like a lot of the military people that are oppressed there. And then we have this like wealthy family, what are they called, the Zhangs, something like that, who will probably try to use their money to get to the emperor's seat as well. So I'm just so intrigued and excited, and this was such a wild ride. As I said, I couldn't stop reading this book. I'm obsessed with these characters, and so I will talk to you when I'm halfway through the second book, and please, let this be just as good. I need this to be good. So I'm just out of the shower. Please ignore this. But I'm now halfway through He Who Drowned the World and I needed to talk to you about it. I'm also in my kitchen because it is late in the evening and the kitchen still has a lot of light. So this is a lot to take in. I'm very sorry, but let's talk about the book. I am so obsessed with these characters. I must say that my reading experience for the first half of this book wasn't quite what I wanted it to be, just because I was way too busy. I also had a migraine, and so I couldn't just sit down and read the book. I read quite a bit of it, then didn't read for a very long time, and now just finally picked it back up. So that is quite disappointing, and definitely I would have liked to just sit down and read that whole book within like 3 days. It just didn't happen that way. So if I am a bit vague about some things, that's probably why. But we're getting back into the story pretty much where we left off. And our characters are all in quite different situations from when we have met them. Some of them have definitely grown into themselves, which I think is very fun to see, because now in the second book they can be very unapologetically their like worst selves. And let's be real, these characters are a mess. These characters are flawed. They're not great people, but the author just manages to make you look at them and really see them and understand. And so you're kind of weirdly rooting for them while they do the worst things possible. Now, I do love that, but I can see a lot of people not really enjoying that kind of story, and that's totally fine. So just be prepared that these characters are not great people. They're not good people. There are very few, but only in side characters, I would say. And yeah, so I'm living for these characters, for their flaws and their like horrible actions, and I'm rooting for them. I am not ashamed to admit that. And so, as I said, some of these characters have really grown into their own. Other characters have revealed who they really are to us. So it is just a fascinating mix, and we do also get kind of a new perspective of a person we had seen before in the first book, but not that much. So now this person plays a much bigger role. And I do like the portrayal of these different factions that we see, and the way that we don't only focus in on one of these, but we see like all of the moving pieces, except for one who's always a little bit in the shadows, and that is very exciting. I'm just really enjoying this one. Talking about a different book recently in a Discord chat, I said that I don't like a book with a villain POV. And what makes this one different is that you're just not sure who the villain is. Like, there is obviously one character you root for the most, but that doesn't mean that they're not a villain in a way too. So that just makes it so interesting and fun to follow along. And you just watch them all struggle, and probably by the end of this book, a lot of them will crash and burn. And I'm kind of intrigued to see that, but I will probably also be devastated with some of these stories. We'll see. What else can I say? Like, for me, the characters are like the biggest thing in this series, but obviously the plot is moving along too. Maybe one thing that I have noticed is that a character we don't really see a lot of, at least in the first half of this book, is Ma, and I'm definitely sad about that. I am intrigued to see whether we will get more of her again, but because of where the plot is going, she's kind of left behind, and that is a little bit sad. I definitely need to see her again soon. But with the other characters, we do see some alliances. We do see some people who end alliances and become enemies, and it's just, yeah, the pieces are moving, And I am very intrigued to see who loses next, because it's a big messy fight. Anyone can lose at any time. So yeah, definitely the plot is very intriguing. The characters are perfection. What else is there? I mean, world building wise, I don't think we get anything new. The world is pretty much established in the first book, because there isn't a lot of magic. There is like this tiny sprinkle, and it doesn't really evolve from there, I would say. And yeah, it's just a good time. We learned something about one of the characters, like their father. And the way we learned that was very, very evil, because basically the character we learn it with is high. They're not really themselves in that moment when they learn that. And so their reaction is basically like, oh, whatever. And I was like, wait, what? Like, what? And so, yeah, this opened up absolutely new possibilities of like horrible things that will happen in the second book, in the second half of the book. And I'm here for it. I'm intrigued. I am loving it. So yeah, let's see where it goes. I love my messy babies. I love my messy, flawed babies. Let's go see some of them die. So last night I finished reading He Who Drowned the World, and I will now try to do the final update for it. And I don't even really know where to begin. So let's begin at the end. This book made me cry. This book made me feel so many things. I was shocked, I was devastated, I was scared. I had to put the book down at some moments just because it was getting too much. This book is phenomenal if you like the flawed, the horrible, terrible, ambitious, cunning queers. You need to read this series. And yeah, it was just everything. I gave it 5 stars. I think it is phenomenal. It is such a great sequel to the first book. So I don't really know what else to say except go read it right now. It was so good. Now I can see that this series is definitely not for everybody because these characters, they do horrible things. I was there for it. Like, I really don't mind reading about horrible things in books, and I think that the way it was portrayed was always done with enough distance so you can read about it, even though some of the things still like punched right through my heart. I said so flippantly in my last update that we're gonna see some characters die, and I don't think it is a surprise with the series that we do, and not all of it was great to see. Like 2 characters in particular, very painful, but this is how life goes. But actually, it's not, because one of those characters in real history did not die. So Shelley Parker-Chan made up this suffering just for us, okay? So yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. If you like dark fantasy books that are inspired by history, if you don't need a lot of like flashy magic, just a tiny sprinkling of something going on with the magic, if you like flawed characters, dark characters, characters that have to go through hell to get where they want to be, you need to read the series, honestly. Just do it, thank me later, and I just hope you listen to my advice because this was amazing and I'm so glad I finally picked it up. I said at the very beginning of the video that I was hesitant because I was scared that it would be too much like the Poppy War, and I didn't really love the Poppy War series. But honestly, this series is what I wanted the Poppy War to be like. This really has the ruthless female main character that even, you know, maybe isn't female in the end at all. It's just something to figure out. So yeah, that's what I want to say for the spoiler-free part. Go read it, love it, come back, discuss spoilers with me. And if you have read this duology, then now we're gonna go into some spoilers. So for everyone else, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Leave a like and a nice comment, and I'll talk to you soon. But for the people who want to talk some spoilers, let's get into it. And I don't even know where to start. I feel like this book was so much was going on, and our characters just really, I wanted to say blossomed, but that sounds like something beautiful, and for a lot of these characters, it wasn't exactly beautiful. Now, one thing I am very, like, happy is maybe the wrong word, but one thing I enjoyed seeing is that we have, and I'm gonna mispronounce all of these names, but Bao Zhang, that we have him play such a bigger role in this book, because I was really intrigued by his character in the first book, and so having the chance to see more of his development, of his mind, of his cunning in this book was amazing. And I think if you read the first book, you think that the title of the second book refers to Ouyang, but it doesn't, and I think that is just very clever. I also really enjoyed the way that we do have this portrayal of his darkness and then Zhu's light, the way that they seem so opposite, but they're really not, and the way that was played with at the end was just phenomenal. I really enjoyed that, and I think it's just so interesting to see a character like that who is so desperate, but not desperate in the way that Ouyang was. It's just this desperation for people to see him and to accept him the way he is, but then because he's denied that for so long, it changes into he doesn't want people to see his true self anymore. He just wants him to show the world his depravity, so they at least see some of him. I can't really talk about that eloquently, obviously, but I just really loved that perspective. It was just so fascinating, and another way to show how these like very strong like gender norms are hurtful to men as well as women and everyone. And yeah, that was very interesting to see in this character. And I already talked about Young now. His fate, it definitely broke me. So I was hoping so much that he would somehow wake up and somehow see the chance that Zhu brought into his life. And we see at the end with Bao Zhang that he gets it. He gets the chance that he's offered. But Young doesn't really until it is very much too late. So it was just so heartbreaking to see that. And what is my hair doing? What's going on? Yeah, I definitely cried because of him. Let's be real. He is so broken, like the way that his self-destruction is portrayed and how he even gets Zhu to help him inflict pain upon himself because that's his only way out, basically his only way to move forward. And the way that it didn't mean anything at the end because his father was never murdered. It was so devastating, and obviously it just shows how these revenge plots, even when they work out, they're never worth it. I just also really loved the way that Zhu was thinking about this at the end, how she was thinking about that she always thought it was strength to keep pursuing your wish, your dream, to just hold on to it so fast, to never let that go, never let her greatness go, that she thought this was the strength, but then with these other characters, it was what destroyed them in the end, or almost destroyed them in the end. And if they could just let go, that would have been the strong thing to do for them. And so I also really loved that sometimes letting something go is the hard part, not pursuing your own goals is the hard part, and to kind of reconfigure yourself to find your happiness is the hard part. So loved the discussion about that, even though it was kind of brief, but I think it still packed the punch that we needed at that point, because up until that point we have the story of like strong-minded people doing horrible things at all times and still getting what they want. So having that at the end, I think, was very important as a message as well. And then obviously the whole thing about that Zhu doesn't want to be emperor for herself, but like because she has a dream of what she wants to achieve when she is the emperor, and that is what sets her apart from the other players. And I saw so much of Kuni from the Dandelion Dynasty series in Zhu in the second book, because she is so charismatic and she can pull people in and keep them close. And the way that when Ma describes that she herself and also Judah, how they gave their help and their lives and what they did, how they gave that to her instead of it having been taken from them to release her from any guilt. That was also just such a great moment, and it just really showed the difference. And as I said, I could really see Cooney in her in those moments, and these are the kind of like leader characters that I really love to read about, because it is such a contrast to what we think a strong male leader should be like. And so seeing these charismatic leaders is just wonderful to me. I just really, really love it. And yeah, just overall, I don't know what else I could even talk about. There's so much going on. I think the only thing I really didn't enjoy was the part with the fleet. Now, I know that this fight on the lake historically was very important, and so it would also be important in the book. But the whole thing with the ghosts, and then we just drown everyone and go through, that didn't make any sense to me. Like, I'm not an expert on drowning, but I don't know how many men were on these ships. But you have like, I don't know, 6 women or something. It sounded like 6 women or something, just running around reviving a whole army on a ship. I didn't buy it. I didn't like that part. That was a little bit too out there for me. But yeah, that was the only part I didn't like. Apart from that, loved it. Loved every moment of it. It's so dark. It is so dark. Like, I can't even begin to tell you. What I also really liked in the end is the way that we see Lady Key, I don't know, brought back right at the end with her revenge. And she didn't really get it in the end, I guess, but I still liked it. I still liked her like returning one more time with her plotting. Overall, it was such a joy, even though it's really not a joyful book, but I had the best time. This book gripped me, all of my insides held me tight and made me finish the second half of the book in one day, which is a feat. So yeah, that's my thoughts. I think I probably forgot like 10 other things I wanted to say, but it was so good. It was so good. I hope you enjoyed it as well when you read it. If you didn't, I'm sorry, but I loved it. I loved it so much. So yeah, have a great day and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.